Hello everyone, and welcome to some MiSTer FPGA news. This week, we will be talking about updates to the custom Konami CPU that's used on The Simpsons and Aliens arcade games, a MiSTer case with a built-in keyboard, an update to the Saturn core, and more. So let's get to it. If you have a Thrustmaster T300 RS racing wheel, Mr. Warris on the MiSTer FPGA forums has a guide helping you set up the wheel. They wanted to share some basic configuration information, per game configuration settings, and pre-configured input mat files to make things easier for anyone wanting to set up the wheel. The guide is in a forum post on the MiSTer FPGA forums. If you check the forum post, you will see detailed descriptions of tests being done along with some attached files and video examples. There are tests for Outrun on the PC Engine core, Spy Hunter Arcade, and also some PlayStation tests for Ridge Racer Type 4, Gran Turismo, and Colin McRae 2.0. Mr. Warris plans to keep this forum thread updated as more games are tested. Bottego had previously mentioned last week that a lot of work has already been done for a Haunted Castle core, and all that's needed is for the CPU to be finished. Now he recently posted a screenshot for MX5000, another game that runs on similar hardware. The screenshot posts talk about the progress that's being done with the CPU. Bottego also posted some progress on the custom Konami CPU that's used in games like Aliens and The Simpsons. This team has already started the design phase, which will involve designing a few hardware units and then joining them with a programmable control circuit. These are two games that I'm really excited to see come to MiSTer, especially The Simpsons, because it's one of my favorite arcade beat-em-ups of all time. It was also thought that the Konami CPU work could be derived from the current M6809 CPU work, but due to minor differences, a rewrite will be needed. Bottego has a very detailed post on Patreon regarding the history of the CPU and why the current M6809 can't be used and what steps are going to be taken for the new implementation. Todd from Retrofrog introduced a work-in-progress case that can house a built-in keyboard. This should bring you back to the old days of where the guts of a computer were inside the keyboard. How the keyboard will be integrated and what keyboard will be used is still up in the air, but the case will also include a slot for an MT32 Pi. Retrofrog will release the 3D files for this case to Patreon subscribers once the design is finalized. You can join the Patreon for $3 a month. This will be perfect for a MiSTer setup that's dedicated for computer cores. Compared to a real Commodore 64, Retrofrog's case is the same depth but has a shorter width and height. The case will also work with a standard MiSTer setup and will not require a specialized I/O board. But if you're wanting something that looks like a real C64, myretrocomputer.com has what you need. However, since this case wasn't made specifically for MiSTer, it will need one of several mini ITX I/O boards available for purchase. SRG320 has made an update to the Saturn core that involves the Saturn CD block. The CD block is what the Saturn uses to read data off of CDs. So this update should improve compatibility that involves CD reads. What games are affected are not known yet, but as has been done before, I'm sure someone will compile the core and there will be plenty of time for people to test out games. If the Saturn is a system that you would love to see on MiSTer, consider supporting SRG320 on Patreon. Bottego has received a PCB of Splatterhouse from Lightcaster Games. It is going to be used for analysis and core development. This beat-em-up is going to be another great addition for the MiSTer FPGA project. Furtek has posted high-resolution die images of some custom chips for the CPS3 hardware. This is possible through the process of decapping. Decapping involves physically opening a chip to be able to see the silicon inside. This will allow you to see how the chip physically works and help document the chip by being able to take high-resolution images of the CPU die. The capping is very helpful for chips that are not very well documented, but it can also be helpful for chips that already have documentation because very often, developers find that the documentation does not completely match how the chip works, and CPU decapping will help resolve those issues. Depending on the chip, this process can be destructive, so once you decap the chip, it's no longer functional. Fortunately, the CPS3 boards that were donated to Bottego were all non-working boards that were not possible to bring back to life. So the best use of those boards is to help document the hardware. There are developers already interested in using these images to trace out the chips. Here's an example of a chip trace by Furtek. It's of the NES MC3 mapper that Furtek decapped and traced. However, the CPS3 chips that were imaged are much more complicated and will involve multiple people to spread out the work. David Shadoff, who's worked on multiple MiSTer cores, including the PC Engine core and also PC Engine software emulation, has obtained a PCFX GA card. This is an ISA card that allowed you to play PCFX games on an IBM-compatible PC in DOS. David is going to be looking at the circuit layout of the PCB, so even if no core comes out of this, at the very least we will get documentation. And David has already been documenting the PCFX on GitHub. The intention is to eventually have a core developed, but that will entail a lot of work, and at the moment, only information is being gathered for the hardware. So that's it for this week's episode. I provided links to all my sources in the description. Make sure you also check out retrorgb.com to see my MiSTer News videos in blog form and to get more retro-related content. And if possible, support them on Patreon too. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button and its bell icon so you can get notified of future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you next time.